Good afternoon, family. It is an honor, and in fact it is deeply humbling to be here with you as we honor our dear, beloved Dr. Vincent who was a minister of the people, and more than that, a child of God. This son of Harlem, who was born in the bloom of a cultural renaissance, lived his life as a living simile of Langston Hughes' poetry. It was in the military that Dr. Harding would become a conscientious objector. While aiming a rifle at an imaginary enemy in training camp, he would hear the voice of God telling him not to be any nation's tool. It was that conviction that would lead Brother Vincent to the Mennonite Church. In 1958, he would be a part of a delegation of ministers that went down south to see what was going on in the movement. While there, they decided that they would reach out for Dr. King. As the story goes, they found the public telephone and looked up the King family in the phone book. It would be Coretta who would answer the phone. Dr. King himself on bed rest, recovering from a stab wound he had experienced in Harlem. While sitting on Dr. King's bed, talking and joking and laughing for about an hour, Dr. King would invite Dr. Harding to return to the South and work with him in the civil rights movement, what Dr. Harding called the Black Freedom Struggle. Dr. King saying, "You Mennonites know something about nonviolence." A year later, Vincent and Rosemary would return, where they would found Mennonite House here in Georgia, literally just around the block from the King residence. A place that would become a space of refuge for civil rights workers, as well as a point of engagement for those interested in learning more about what was going on. For their part, Mennonite Central Committee and the Mennonite Church was less than supportive. They gave the Hardings grief as they went about the work of supporting the aims and objectives of the movement. But as Scripture teaches us, the stone that the builders rejected would indeed become the spiritual cornerstone of a beloved community of men and women of all walks of faith and life, the world over, that would embrace Dr. Harding and his message of justice and peace in our world. In 1967, Harding would write what is the greatest anti-war speech ever written by an American. You should honor him for that. It was Harding who radicalized King's voice and spoke to what they both called the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. That prophetic indictment is only made more profound today as we witness the U.S. government's continued reliance on war as a means to resolve global conflict. In that same speech, they condemned what they termed the giant triplets of racism, materialism, and militarism. Today, from Gaza to Iraq to Ukraine to Ferguson, Missouri, we see this three-headed hydra wreaking unholy havoc on the lives of poor people worldwide. Their most searing indictment was when they said in that speech that a nation that continues to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. End quote. We see that prophecy realized today as we witness military tanks, sniper rifles, and armored helicopters crowding the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, squashing the constitutional rights of those that would protest for right. Yet in the righteous defiance of those activists on the ground in the United States today, we are watching the resurrection of a movement. The very freedom movement that Dr. Harding gave his life for. His soul is now a seed, born anew in the cries of the oppressed for justice and a peace we all seek. That river that he wrote so eloquently about flows ever on. Dr. Vincent Harding, our brother, our friend, our comrade, our veteran of hope, guiding us still in a world caught in the vice of violence and political upheaval, whose children cry out in the ages-old voice of that ancestor, African woman, on a plantation not far from here, who, empowered by her own divinity, cracked the heavens when she cried, "Over my head, I see freedom in the air. There must be a God somewhere." Thank you.